Thank you for having me. This changed everything for architects. Prior to 1950, there were only 70,000 of these worldwide. Prior to that, this is how we used to build buildings. This is the Monadnock building in Chicago. There are many examples like this. But you look, it's an office building. This is the public space and the office space around it. It's a beautiful interior, lots of natural light, cross ventilation, hoppers up above in the lobby, very, very open environment. This is what we built after that. This is a very famous building, the Seagram's building, also in Chicago from about 1970. But if you look at the lobby, there's no light, no view, all artificial light, and basically the building's an energy hog. So here's the difference between the two. I mean, which one do you want? Do you want this light-filled building or this one full of artificial light? I always like to say, you know, I asked anyone out there dislike natural light or views or, you know, nice ventilation. It's a universal thing we respond to, but yet in modern buildings, this is often our solution. So when we do buildings, we're always looking at historical models of how we can make buildings respond better to their geographic region, the microclimate, to issues that make not buildings that are just beautiful, but that are also performative. And so, for example, when we did a school, we look back, and these are some things we found. This is a Philip Wheatley Elementary School built in 1955 by an architect named Charles Colbert in New Orleans, Louisiana. And air conditioning existed then, but they didn't use it. But they came up with this kind of plan that you can see, not very different from the Monadnock building with the central court that has light and air, lots of cross ventilation, views, and so forth. And it really was a wonderful school and an environment, you know, great for kids to learn with views. We don't really build schools much like that anymore. We kind of close them up and not have views, not have light. But somewhere along the way, some bright and smart people decided that this building needed air conditioning. And this is what it looks like today. The building didn't perform well because it wasn't designed to have air conditioning. And so when they put air conditioning in, it got hot. Hotter than when the building did not have air conditioning. So they abandoned the building. This will probably be torn down. There are other buildings. This is another really interesting school, also done in 1953 by Curtis and Davis in New Orleans. And it's just a beautiful plan, but you can see these are all the classrooms. And this is a stair that serves 2 classrooms. So it has, unlike schools we build today, almost no extra space. It's all usable space. And what they did was lift the building up in the air to kind of create this shaded porch for the kids. Air could flow under, air flows over, lots of light, ventilation. So it's not just a poetic space, but it also is performative. And I think that's what we always try to do, is look for ways where we can achieve both things. My mother would call this Jewish common sense, you know, just... So we just finished this high school this is in a very poor neighborhood in Los Angeles, South LA, and it's really the neighborhood building. So we looked at those examples when we created this school, adopting a lot of those same principles where the classrooms have light and ventilation on both sides, airflow is induced through it, and there's lots of public space even on a very tight site. So this is what it looks like. This is the west facing. The building's placed on the south part of the site, so it actually shades their small courtyard without having to put a cover over it. And these devices you can see here, this is a west shading device. So when you swing around in front of it, it is very open. And the classrooms, it allows light and views, and this kind of filtered light take away the glare. And it's really a wonderful place for kids to learn. So they get light, they get air, but they also can get the privacy of being in that space. As you swing around to the south, it has 650 solar panels built into the facade, and the building generates 70% of its own power. It's a detail of the screen and the entry. So we look at ways to, the solar panels I think are beautiful in themselves, but they also shade the building. So what we try to do is make our buildings passively efficient so that they're we don't just do energy generation, but we bring the demand for the building down and then provide energy so that even without panels or other active devices, the building is very, very efficient. And then the windows are built into the panels, and some windows are behind so that you get filtered light as well as some direct light and views with it. And then as you move around to the east, where the morning sun comes directly in, we have a system of horizontal fins that also shade the building. And you can see once you go behind that, you get dappled light. That also just makes it a comfortable and inviting place for kids to learn. And I think that's really important, is your environment has a tremendous impact, not just on the people who occupy the space, but how they care for it as well. When they're comfortable in a building, they tend to take better care of their buildings. They take more pride in that. I grew up in Florida, and this is what I'm not quite that old, but this would be called the Florida vernacular house, or a cracker house. And these were built purely out of necessity, where they raised the building off of the ground so that insects couldn't get in, but also air would flow through. You can see the big porch, shaded porch. It's also referred to as a shotgun house because you can literally shoot a shotgun right through the house and not hit any walls. But these homes you can't get more efficient for a building. I don't think anything could exist more efficient than this. The fireplace, there are no hallways in the house, but for me it's an extremely poetic and beautiful piece of work. It has a certain simplicity and its connection to the land. And when I was in grad school, I was doing work that I didn't even understand myself, but I was really fascinated of the things like the poetry of like living with nature. And this was a project I did in grad school called the Tree House, and it embodies all the things today that would be considered sustainable architecture or sustainable design. I had no idea that term even existed then, but I suppose I was doing it. I also worked for a couple architects in Florida. This is one of them, Gene Leedy, who did these, beautiful buildings, again, that coexisted with a really, really difficult, hot, sticky climate, and created these beautiful courtyards and space where you think, and Tennessee gets that too, it's very hot and humid, but that you can live outside. You can live with nature in a lot of ways. And so when we did our own home, my partner and wife, who's also an architect and grew up in Florida as well, we looked at some of these beautiful buildings that were being built in the 1940s and 50s, and this one is called the Umbrella House, done by Paul Rudolph in 1953. And what Rudolph did was go to a local tomato farmer and buy the tomato stakes for planting to build over his house what he called the umbrella. And it provided shade over this kind of beautiful modern glass building. And, you know, very poetic, but also very simple. And when we did our own home, we thought of this and the potential of this idea is in California. And so we added on to a 450 square foot house. It's now 1,800 square feet. This is what existed, and we added this piece. So we have 2 streets. We changed the entry. It has 79 solar panels on it now. And that's what it looked like before we started. This is what it looks like now. And we have a utility bill of less than $500 a year. And the building is meant to really be more like light on the land, more lines that float in space, vertical and horizontal lines. It has, besides the energy generation, all the rooms have natural light. We don't need to turn the lights on except for when it's dark. All the rooms have natural ventilation. And because we're in California, Southern California, we could live outside. So our house is really an extension like of the garden. And you can see that it does really connect the inside and out. It's quite compact. This is from the living room. This is our entry door, and that's our guest bathroom door right there. So you can see it's hidden behind the bookshelf. And this, you know, all sustainable materials, natural materials. Even the stair is perforated so that the heat rises through the 2-story space, induces airflow, and it's just a very comfortable place to live. And I think that's really what we strive to do, is make places that people really like. Many of our clients could care less about, you know, doing something sustainable or building responsibly, but they get it anyways from us. They just don't know they get it. We don't talk to them about it, but they get it anyways. And that's our master bedroom. We constantly look back at history. There are great examples that you can use today that still work. This is Bastakia in Dubai. This is from the 1600s. And you know, in the desert climate, they use these screens or these shading devices, again, that are multifunctional or multivalent. They're part of a rich history that has to do with geometry and aesthetics, but they also are performative. And they not just provide shade, but they also, you know, women were really not meant to be seen, so they provide privacy. And so we use a lot of these techniques. We don't invent them. We just kind of give them new meaning or look at them in a more contemporary way. So we did we're confronted really with a really nice project that had views of downtown Los Angeles and views of the ocean, but is on a very busy street in the Hollywood area. And it's like, so how do you give someone these incredible views but also give them privacy? And that's a functional problem. What also I was fascinated with was this idea of a building that could move, or something that would reflect the people who live there. And I started to look at other things, and I looked at this artist named Patrick Hughes, and Patrick Hughes did these paintings called prospectivity, where the paintings are actually fixed, but they move as you move past them. And let's see if I can make this move. They're built in a way where the frames are built in reverse perspective, and then they're painted in perspective. It's not going to go for me. But as you move across them, the paintings appear to move, but they're really just fixed. And so I thought, can I make my building do a similar thing? And so this idea of this screen or shutter that people could actually operate themselves allowed the occupants to adjust to their own needs, to their climactic needs, but as well as their privacy, the kind of views they want. And as a result, the building kind of gets redesigned every day or every hour. And so it really becomes a reflection of the people who are there. And it's done through this really modest device of a, kind of shutter and a little space in providing for each of those people. We also recently just finished a proposal for a small chapel in Jacksonville, Florida. That's our site. And it's an interfaith chapel, and it's always puzzling to me, interfaith. It's like we want you to do something that's spiritual but appeals to nobody. It's like it can't be any denomination, but we want it to appeal to everyone. And, so I thought about things in any kind of religious activity. There always seemed to be the gowning or the costuming and the kind of rituals that go with it. So I thought, the dress was really important, even the, wedding ceremony. And could our building be like almost like a gown? Also thought about, this image of the little white church on the hill that's so simple and poetic. And looked at other examples, again, going back to Sarasota, Florida, a building built by Victor Lundy in 1958, a Lutheran church that is a beautiful building, but you can see the shade line. Look at this, the porch. It's all glass, but all in shade, and it has this beautiful wood interior. And I got real fascinated with the wood ceiling and wanted to do something in wood, and looked, how can you do that? And I found all kinds of examples. This is an armory building in Oregon done in 1926, where they use this technique called lamella, small pieces of wood built like trusses that could span these great distances. So we came up with this idea of making a building that would be like a gown, a formal gown, and doing it out of wood. But we placed the building on the edge of the lake, connecting it to other cosmic things like the North Star. The North Star, or Polaris, is the only star in the northern hemisphere that doesn't move. It's always at like 36 degrees north. If you look, you'll always see it. So we aligned windows with the North Star and also the summer solstice. But other things we did, and I'm sure you know this too, when it's very hot and you walk into a building with air conditioning, you instantly freeze. And my house in Florida was always the one that had water running down on the inside of the glass. My mother kept it ice cold. But we created this kind of transition, and you can see these heating diagrams you come from the hot to a transition space before you cool, and then the building acts like a thermal chimney. So breezes can flow through, the heat rises and moves out of the building. So again, in an environment where it's a very tough climate, this becomes a very comfortable building, even without mechanical systems. So here it is on the lake. And this is it as you approach it. You see the kind of dress lifts up where you enter underneath. And then the interior is this kind of wood, light-filled, somewhat mysterious volume of space. My office is in, or was in Santa Monica for 17 years, and right next to the Santa Monica Museum of Art. And they rolled this solar panel out every day. I have no idea what it did, but they rolled it out with cones and all, you know, everything. They set this thing up. And you can find these examples like everywhere. This is a solar-powered camel delivering refrigerated vaccines in the desert. And we're really inventive people. We find ways. It's just incredible the things you can find all over the world like this. But where we've kind of failed is more at an institutional level. We've always found ways to not do this where it doesn't pay off. So I'm going to leave you with a message or a quote that one of our great architectural historians said in an essay on architectural and civilization. This is 50 years old, where he said that our architectural development is bound up with the course of our civilization. To the extent that we permit our institutions and organizations to function blindly as our bed is made, so must we lie on it. The future of our civilization depends upon our ability to select and control our heritage from the past, to alter our present attitudes and habits, and to project fresh forms into which our energies may be freely poured. Thank you very much.